Good evening, afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Here's a little video showing the inside of our Hammond A100 organ. Take my glasses off because I can see better. Here's our Hammond A100. This is a Leslie 145 cabinet that originally had a Leslie 147 amplifier in it, but because the Hammond A100, like the B3 and the C3, is a two-channel low impedance organ, I opted to switch out the amp in the 145 cabinet for a 122, which is the more appropriate pairing of the Leslie amplifier. It also is a two-channel low impedance input, so that when we had the previous spinet organ hooked up to this 145, it was only wired with one channel. And I think it was my father had, maybe it was an M3, I'm not sure, it was a spinet. But anyway, so when we purchased the A100, it necessitated switching the amp to get the highest audio output of the organ from a 147 single channel amp to a 122, which has low impedance input, which cancels the noise. So anyway, lurking inside that 122, that 145 smaller cabinet is a 122 pretty powerful amp. And there's also a vintage 15-inch Alnico speaker with a huge magnet on the bottom of that, which makes this a pretty high fidelity sounding rig. The purpose of this today was that I haven't performed any routine maintenance on this organ in a while. Previously, as I've posted, I did recap the tone generator on this organ. And I'm not sure if I did videos, but I certainly posted pictures of the tone generator here that had to be pulled out, and all of these leads had to be desoldered so that I could get in there. But today I had two things in mind. One was that I'm going to oil the organ. So coming in, even though it's pretty dark, you can see right there is the organ oiling funnel on one side of the tone generator, and it'll also be down here too. I can see it right there through all of the wires. These are your preset wires. I need to fill both of those up with 2 full cups full of oil so that they'll seep down through the strings and oil the spinning tone wheels of this organ. That's cool. The more important thing that I wanted to do, because I haven't had this organ opened up since I recapped the tone generator and installed that 122 amp in the Leslie. But the most important thing is that I had to figure out what kit the organ needed to be attached to the 122 amplifier, and it was a different kit than what feeds the 147 amp. So I had to go to my friend Carl Greason, who sold us the organ. Did he give me parts? I don't think that he did, actually. He gave me some parts. No, he did. When I finally researched which was the appropriate kit to run the 122, he came up with a slurry of parts, including the Alnico speaker, all for about $115. And he gave me those parts, and I had to do the research to figure out how to hook it up. And I want to show that. Here, I had to improvise. Basically, it needed, here's the box right here that you need to feed a 122. Now, there are lots of different types of kits, but that's the Leslie Echo control that's appropriate to run the 122. Now, I mounted that on the inside of the cabinet there. You can see that will be the left side of the cabinet facing out. I had to figure this out. That's the Leslie Echo control, and it also needed this box too, which I mounted underneath which took quite a bit of doing to get into this cabinet and to position your shelf to be able to tap these holes and get the screws in. And then the last piece of the puzzle was to mount the Reichle plug, which I did here. I have a right angle connector, and it ended up being also mounted on the left side of the cabinet on the inside of the organ. So in short, these three pieces are what you need. You need this box, you need this box, and you need the Reichle plug. And I had to install all of those because it didn't have them for the 147. What is a little complicated about this particular system is that to accomplish the switching, you have two crescent switches on the front of the organ, which are this. Here's one. I'm missing the knobs on both of these. Here's one. This is the fast and low speed for the Reichle. And then this is the switching box, because the A100, like the M3 Spinet, has got its own built-in speakers. So unlike the B3, which has no bottom and has no bass, the A100 is a self-contained organ. And you can see with the organ open here on the bottom, here is a bevy of 12-inch speakers that are mounted within the console, the cabinet itself. This is a 12 and this is a 12, so there are two 12-inch speakers that it drives from this, its own internal power amp, which is that. And then this is another separate tube power amp that's driving a spring reverb unit, and it has its own dedicated 12-inch speaker. So all of the B3 purists would nay all of this extra gear here, but when you have it and you happen to have this organ, you should use it. So I drive both the Reichle 145 cabinet with the 122 amp in tandem with the internal speakers running both at the same time, which gives me, you know, like quadraphonic sound coming out of the organ. And with a recap tone generator, I haven't done the vibrato scanner yet because I don't use the vibrato very often. Pretty much, you know, I couldn't be happier with the sound of the organ. But the selector switch that I showed you that lets you pick between the Reichle amplifier, which is here, right? It's your main ensemble echo Reichle switch. And when you flip it to the left, it turns on only the internal workings of the organ. When you put it in the middle to ensemble, it's driving both the Reichle and the internal speakers. And when you turn it to the right, it's only driving the Reichle. Well, that particular switch was not wired up the appropriate way for a Reichle 122. It was wired up for the 147, and Carl had it rigged for the A100 when we had the 147 amp, but it never did work because whenever you would put it on main, it was a terrible hum. So I basically had to figure out how to wire that switch with this new kit, and I figured that out. And it turns out it's pretty sophisticated little trick. The wiring, needing both of these boxes, and one of those boxes, I think, which is going to be that box right there, to switch the solenoid inside the 122 amp to flip from slow motors to fast motors. The organ sends out a high voltage DC signal across the instrument line, and that DC signal from that box right there is being fed, if you can look, like, okay, right there. You see this tube? That tube has a little adapter on it with a wire coming off, and that's tapping that DC high voltage off of that tube, and that's running over here and it's going into this box, and that is what switches your Leslie speed. It needs that voltage, and it turns out that the way that the speed switcher, that high voltage coming out of this box, also with the Leslie echo control, which is your switching from the main speakers to the Leslie speakers. It's a fairly complicated wiring diagram. The two of those work together. But in essence, to make a long story short, the way that that crescent switch works is it doesn't actually take the two channels of audio, which low impedance means that they're out of phase. They're two audio signals and 180 degrees out of phase with each other, and when they are combined back together at the Leslie amp, it cancels the noise. So you have two channels of audio that needs to be sent either to the internal speakers or to the Leslie. The way that that switch is wired is that it doesn't actually route that audio. The way that it mutes one particular, the organ channel or the Leslie channel, is by taking the two out of phase audio signals from the organ and combines them together. And two audio signals that are 180 degrees out of phase cancel each other out. So it's a rather ingenious switch mechanism that's inside that crescent switch. Well, that meant that you needed 4 conductors of wire, not 3, which is how that switch previously was wired for the 147. It only had 3 wires, so I had to use trailer wire, 4-conductor trailer wire, to rewire that switch so that it would route the audio the appropriate way. But anyway, to make a long story short, I did it. I figured all that out, and I mounted the new kit inside the organ. So here's this high voltage box being fed by the power tube. Here's the Leslie switching box, which is mounted on the right. And here's my Leslie plug. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go inside here and I'm going to put oil in my oiling caps. So this will be maintenance that needs to be done. I'm going to take my glasses off because I see better. Anyway, I just filled that up, and it pretty much emptied itself out pretty quickly. And I'm going to fill it up again, and it's pretty much going to empty itself out. So I'm going to do that just one more time just to be careful. And now I'm going to come over here to the other side. I'm going to have to set the camera down because the oiling cap is right there, and I'm going to have to reach inside there. So bear with me for just a minute to see how I can come in underneath these wires. Which is not happening. Did not hit or disconnect any particular thing. This is more trouble than I thought to get to that oiling cap. Okay, I think I got, yeah. I think that'll be just fine. So that means that basically my routine maintenance there, there's the kind of cap back there in the background. It's kind of gold. I put 2 squirts in that, and I put about 3 squirts in that. And I think that that'll be enough. So anyway, that is the one little bit of routine maintenance that you need. Now what I have to do is I have to put the tone generator cover back on, which is this. I only have like 2 screws to do that. And then I got to put the cover back on the back of the organ, which is grill cloth pretty much. So anyway, just the rundown of the inside. This, of course, is your tone generator, this big long thing. Here's your vibrato scanner. I don't know what all this stuff is. I know that this is your preset panel, which I've not even taken the time to go hook that up yet. Here's your preamp that hangs underneath. Here are two internal speakers. Here's your reverb amp. Here's your reverb speaker. Here's your spring reverb hanging there. Here's the internal speaker amp. And then here is my whole new kit that I installed on the organ. So anyway, hope that was informative for you today. Taking care of the A100. Take it easy.